I asked you if you saw the meeting, the minutes. Did you see the meetings, Dr. Graham?
No.
Okay. I currently had in my hand the minutes from the meeting, and I ask for unanimous consent to introduce these minutes into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
You would think that an issue as serious as an electromagnetic pulse, which has catastrophic consequences, is not terribly expensive to fix, would have spurred the electric industry into action. You would think that an at-risk industry would want to fix its vulnerabilities. You would think that after not fixing the Aurora vulnerability for years, the industry would want to show some proactive security efforts, send the message that at least they're moving in the right direction. But this is not what happened, Mr. Chairman, on September 11th of last year. According to the minutes, let me quote, "There are no actions expected by the Critical Infrastructure Protection Committee or NERC to this report," unquote. No actions, nothing. The industry, which is, as Chairwoman Clark stated, responsible for operating the security grid, plans on doing nothing to secure its infrastructure or to mitigate this threat. Now, Mr. Naumann, why aren't your colleagues doing more to secure your infrastructure against an intentional or unintentional EMP event or cyber attack? Mr. Naumann.
Congressman, as I said, we want to work with NERC and the industry in identifying what needs to be done, what the threat, what the design threat is. I just heard from Congressman Bartlett, for example, whether the threat is 200 volts per meter or 50 volts per meter.
Mr. Naumann, excuse me. Why aren't you doing anything right now to secure the infrastructure?
In order to...
You're telling me something everybody knows in this room. We listen. Please answer my question.
In order to secure the infrastructure, we first have to determine what threat to protect against and then design mitigation. So I understand it through NERC, Mr. Asante is taking this up as one of the action items, but it has to be done in a thoughtful manner.
So the industry, these are the minutes. I mean, I didn't make it up.
I was testifying.
I yield back.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you. We have Ms. Richardson and Mr. Lujan, and we have 4 votes to take after that. Ms. Richardson.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be very brief so I can give my colleague an opportunity to speak before our break. Is Mr. Sean McKirk present from the department? Okay. I'd like to recommend during the break, Dr. Graham, since you said you've had an unsuccessful engagement of speaking with the department, he's right here, I think, in the 3rd row. And for the record, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recommend that maybe we submit the testimony to the new secretary and urge her and her appropriate department to review the information and give them an opportunity to come forward.
Be happy to do it.
My last point, and I do want to be brief, as I said, for my colleague, having reviewed the bill that we have on the table, I would just like to work with the chairman possibly in a manager's amendment. As I listened to the testimony today, one of the things that I think we could add is in Mr. Farbro's testimony in the very back, he gives 3 points that we could focus on. One is research, which has been much discussed today. Second, refining standards, which there's the ability to do some of that in the bill. But what we don't talk about is he talks about procurement guidance. And specifically from his testimony, he says, in the case, moderate re-engineering of existing procurement guidelines can have tremendous downstream influence in bulk power system cybersecurity, and it can be done immediately. So I'll work with my staff and in conjunction with some of the folks that have been here today to see if there's any way that we can help to strengthen it even further. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. Gentleman from New Mexico for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to my colleague, Ms. Richardson, for being so kind with her time. Mr. Asante, did I hear you correctly that when there was a reference to cybersecurity, that did you say something along the lines of prevention is not necessarily the answer?
I don't think we should put our full faith in preventing attacks. It's very important that we also address investments in being able to categorize, observe them, and respond to them, and minimize their consequences in the system. So we would like to take a comprehensive approach to cyber attacks, not just installing more cybersecurity solutions that have failed in the past. Some of these advanced threats are capable of getting around those solutions. We want to make sure that we've got the full capabilities to be able to handle this important challenge.
Do any of the bulk power systems have a responsibility to report to NERC or the body if there is a cyber attack?
They do. Under the CIP standards today, they have to report security incidents affecting critical cyber assets to NERC. NERC would take that information, analyze it, and pass it on for warnings for other organizations.
To date, have there been any reports to NERC?
Yes, we have received reports of security incidents to the bulk power system.
So is the grid safe today?
I would tell you that I believe that the grid is not immune from attack. We've seen the attacks occur. What we can do is try to respond to those attacks, enhance our security and our ability to respond to them. It's definitely a concern. It's why we're asking for emergency authorities for the federal government for very specific and imminent cyber threats.
So, Mr. Naumann, with that being said, I stand corrected, but I thought I heard you say earlier that you feel that the grid is safe today.
I believe I said it's relatively secure from the threats that we know of. It may not be secure from the threats we don't know of, which is why we support the emergency legislation.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Asante, with that being said, I think that we heard from Ms. Richardson and others the importance of making sure that we're able to provide the information necessary so that you can prepare for any cyber attacks that do exist. But there was a Wall Street Journal article in April of this year that highlighted threats that we do know that occurred that I don't know if they have been addressed or not. But in your testimony, you say that there has been progress made through NERC with the bulk power systems. Mm-hmm. Can you just highlight those quickly?
Sure, absolutely can. Most importantly, our ability to communicate effectively with the 1,800+ entities that comprise the bulk power system is an important capability that we've worked very hard to achieve. The second piece is that we've been working in great partnership with the Department of Homeland Security and Department of Energy to be able to analyze advanced threats. So when we become aware of them, and I'll give you a quick example, we have seen suspicious activity against power system networks. They've reported that to me at the ES-ISAC. I shared that information with our government partners, and they provided excellent analysis of what it looked like, what it was, and we went back and was able to notify and warn other entities of the suspicious activity. So those are the types of progress that I think is very important. I think we're working full force on the collaborative side, but if a cyber threat was imminent and specific, we believe the necessity to have emergency authorities to deal with that and deal with it in a mandatory way are appropriate.
And with that being said, Mr. Naumann, there was a reference made earlier that there's not a set of standards in place for utilities across the country today, that everyone has their own platforms that they operate on, and it would be difficult to institute a fix that would reach everyone. With that being said, is there a need to go to standard platforms as utilities are making investments into the future, understanding that this is a threat that does exist today?
I think there's a need to go to standard protocols. And for example, on the smart grid, dealing with smart grid, FERC has just issued a final rule that said any smart grid devices that are attached to the system should follow protocols that are being developed under the auspices of NIST. So it's the protocols as to how they communicate and how they interact with the system that's very important that they be common and that they be secure.
And the last question I have, Mr. Chairman, is as we go forward and we understand the direction where smart grid will take us and how broadband applications are going to be critical to achieving the efficiencies that we need with distribution and transmission, understanding that NERC's sole responsibility is with bulk power systems and does not include distributed generation or some investor-owned utilities or applications, even within some of our rural cooperatives. Who's overseeing that aspect, and is there anybody are there any, I guess, large umbrella